Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Vanissia and this is episode 5 of the Woolly Worker Knitting Podcast. I'm super excited to be filming today. It's been 3 weeks since I filmed episode 4 and I've got 2 finished objects, 2 main works in progress and a few plans for casting on. I've been working on a test knit, so that's been taking a lot of my attention, but I've really been itching to cast on a lot of the projects that I've been talking about in the channel. So if you've seen some of my past videos, some of those things might be familiar. It feels good to be ticking off a lot of those boxes and to use the yarn I've been purchasing. I also got a few yarn acquisitions that I got over the course of the last 3 weeks on sale for most of them, so that's quite exciting and I'll talk about that. I know that you guys have been enjoying when I talk a bit transparently about prices and everything. So that's something that I'll definitely keep on doing. So for every item that I bring up that is finished, I will talk about the total cost. I will put it on the screen, and that then includes yarn that if I've purchased it on sale, then the price will reflect that. So before we get started, I just wanted to again give a huge thanks to all of you who have been supporting the channel since the beginning. It's just so enjoyable. It's been working so well and it's been a really smooth process and you guys have given good feedback. I've met a lot of nice people. I have an Instagram where you can follow me at thewoollyworker and I post stories every now and then and you guys are always liking the story or messaging and it's just the best part of the day. So yeah, if you enjoy the channel, please consider subscribing or giving the video a like or commenting. I read and reply to every comment. I try to anyway. The podcast will follow the classic structure where I'll talk about what I'm wearing because we need to talk about this. And I will talk about the other finished object that I have. I'll talk about the works in progress and I'll talk about the acquisitions and also, the sort of cast-on plans that are imminent. So like I said before we get started, you can follow me on Instagram or also on Ravelry, where I keep a much more detailed description of, for example, needle size, size of project, finished measurements, colors and everything. But also I try and keep the description box below as detailed as possible with clickable links to the Ravelry pattern project pages and the yarn colors and names, because I know that you guys really like that. And I personally always love it when knitting podcasters say what yarns that they use, because sometimes they just make amazing choices and I need to have the exact same sweater that they have. But anyway, let's get started. So I feel a little bit out of practice because it's been 3 weeks since the last podcast, but I hope that I settle into it. So get yourself comfortable, grab yourself your knitting project that you're currently working on, that you plan to work on in this video, and if you want to let me know what that is, that's also one of my favorite things to do, is read what you guys are working on while watching my videos. I've discovered a few new projects like that. Some other times it's projects that I also really want to cast on, so you're motivating me to work through my big whip pile. But yeah, let's get started. So first things first, I am wearing one of my finished objects, and this is the Lumme sweater by Sari Nordland. So if you saw my last episode, this featured in a false start section that I had, where I brought up on camera 4 or 5 projects that I had started but had to frog for various reasons and issues, and it's done now. So over the course of 3 weeks I frogged that start, I recast it on and worked it, blocked it. I did a little photo shoot with my boyfriend yesterday, took some photos, so I'll insert those periodically through this section. It's great. I'm super happy with the fit. I'm super happy with the color work. I think the contrast is just amazing. This is like a slightly off-white, and this is an extremely dark brown. So it's not black and white, but it has this like black and white illusion. I'm using Cascade 220 in the color suggested by the designer. So we've got natural white and dark Fashion Island, but I'll put the color names below like I said. And in terms of needles, this is where it gets a bit tricky because the designer suggests 3 different needles. She has a needle for the rib detail, a needle for the main stockinette body, and then a needle for the color work. Usually designers say that you should go up a needle size for color work because you have a tendency to be tighter. But I usually have to disregard that because I'm an extremely loose color work knitter. So the main needle that she recommends for the body is 4.5 millimeter, and then 5 millimeter for the color work. But I did the entire body and color work on 4 millimeter needles. And that gave me a fabric I was happy with, color work wise. But what I didn't anticipate was that, yeah, it made the main stockinette body a little bit too tight and too dense. And I was off gauge since the start. But I knew that with the gauge swatch, and I took that into consideration. I did some calculations. Basically, I should have done a size 2, but because my gauge was too tight, that would have given me something too small. So I plugged the numbers into a little Excel formula thing that I've made to get gauge, which I might like talk about in a like separate video about how I modify gauge to suit me, or modify patterns to suit my gauge. So I'll talk about that separately. But I did that, realized that if I did size 3, that would give me the ease that I wanted. It doesn't recommend too much ease, maybe something like 8 centimeters, because it's not supposed to be that oversized, and it's not supposed to be that like fitting either. And I feel like I nailed that. Like I'm getting the ease that I want with this. Like the sleeves are not too baggy, and there's definitely breathing room for like, you know, doing all of that stuff with my arms in case I ever want to do that in real life. So I'm happy that I went for size 3 with my gauge. That was tighter. And I really don't think that you can see a difference in the gauge for color work and non-color work. I feel like it looks extremely even. When you look down, for example, at the sleeve, I think is an example that even though it's on the same needle, the color work isn't like going over or going under, like it's not changing size. When I put the sleeves down, and I'll show some photos, it's a perfect rectangle with parallel lines, if you know what I'm saying. So yeah, so if you haven't seen the previous video, basically my problem when I cast it on was that I cast on the neck for size 2, and I immediately knit the row I was on at the end of the ribbing with the cast on edge to make my double folded collar. The designer suggests that you leave it long and at the very end you sew it down, but I just decided to knit it because I like the stretch that gives me. And then I started doing the bit of the color work here. It's a circular yoke. And I started doing the color work, and then I measured gauge after I had a few rounds, and I realized that the gauge was not great and the sweater was going to be too tight, and I was worried. So I decided to frog everything I had done except the neck, and then I did an increase round to get me to the stitch count for size 3, and then I started color work again. And then once I had finished the yoke, I had another kind of dilemma, because the pattern is amazingly written, by the way, extremely detailed, holds your hand a lot. If anything, something that I didn't like was that it gave weird instructions for German short rows that, if anything, confused me, because I already knew German short rows, so I just, you know, followed my muscle memory of German short rows. But I guess if you've never done them, the instructions could be useful. Anyway, so the design includes a schematic with the, you know, yoke depth, underarm length, sleeve circumference. Like, it's amazing when designers do that, because you can check periodically if you're where they want you to be. And I realized that my yoke was not long enough. So when I put on the yoke just without anything, it was too high up. So if I had split for sleeves then, it would have cut right in my armpit, which is not ideal. But I was a bit scared of having a yoke that was too long, because there was an issue with a previous yoke colorwork sweater, my first sweater. So I decided to add more length to the yoke before splitting for sleeves. I added 12 rounds of the black before splitting for sleeves, and in retrospect I probably could have gotten away with maybe just adding 8 or 6 or something. It was fine. Like, it's fine now. It's not too long a yoke, I think. Like, my armpit is here, so I guess it is quite a long yoke, but it's not as restrictive as the other one was. Like, I can still put my arms up, which was the problem that I had with the other colorwork sweater, is like, if I put my hands up, the entire sweater would lift. I don't think it gives me bat wings. Like, I think it's completely fine. And the yoke is like, even though the fabric is quite dense, like I said at the start, I still feel like it doesn't feel like I'm wearing a cone on me. Like, it still feels able to move, even though it's not as drapey, certainly, as other sweaters have been, or like I've seen on Ravelry and Instagram. But I'm really happy with it. It's going to be a thick sweater. The yoke obviously has twice the thickness because of the colorwork floats, And I'm just really happy that I did that sweater like now, because I know I'm gonna get some wear out of it in the next like month and a half or so. Then I'll have to retire it for the summer. But I'm happy that I did it, because then I can wear it this year. And yeah, it was on my list. It was on my list of sweaters to do. My second video ever that was quite popular, so I'm happy to be taking that box off. But anyway, so you split for sleeves, and then there's some short rows that you do after the color work, because in that way it doesn't interrupt that. Like if you'll see on the videos, but the color work starts at the exact same point at the back, so the yoke actually is completely symmetrical. But actually, before I did all of that, before I split for sleeves, I blocked the yoke, and that's how I realized I needed to add the 12 rounds. So I blocked the yoke, and I put some photos because I was just having an absolute field day, just because of how aesthetically pleasing it was to have this big color work yoke on my extremely long cable, like laid out on the bed. And that's why the sweater took long, because it took a week of kind of like blocking and figuring out the yoke. But the actual knitting of this was incredibly fast. Like the yoke took maybe 2 or 3 days of knitting. Then the sleeves, I remember doing each sleeve in like 2 days. So you probably could do this sweater in 2 weeks, easy. It's worsted weight. The Cascade is the recommended yarn, and some people have done it in a variety of yarns. You can go check on Ravelry, there's a ton of projects. So anyway, I blocked the yoke, decided to add length, split for sleeves, added the short rows, and then worked down the body and stockinette, and then did some ribbing. But actually, before I finished the body, I did the sleeves, because that's usually how I like to do it, so I don't get stuck on sleeve island. Like I said, the sleeves were extremely fast. It was so satisfying. There's 3 charts here for this color work, and it was just like, one chart was like, what, 9 rounds or something, so it was so fast to get to do it. Actually, for the sleeves, something else was that there's a few sets of decreases, and I realized on the first sleeve that at some point I had forgotten a decrease, so I just decreased on the very last round before the color work, and I remembered to do that for the other sleeve. So basically the sleeves are 1 stitch bigger than they should be, but it doesn't matter, like all the way up to the color work, and then they get to the right stitch count, because you need the right stitch count obviously for the color work. I'm super chuffed with the sleeve length. I think it's like absolutely perfect. It's because they're not very tight, so I wouldn't want them to get in the way of me doing things, but they're not too long, so they don't impede my movement. They're not tight, they're like just the tiniest bit tapered, and it's just amazing. It's just absolutely gorgeous to have that color work here that doesn't perfectly matches, like it doesn't perfectly match the yoke, but it kind of calls to it. Like obviously you've got that smaller flower here, the little leaf design from here. It's just an amazing design. I'd highly recommend it to anyone. And then then I went back to the body and worked my way down the body, and I did some short rows at the very end to add some length to the hem. So there's 2 sets of short rows. There's the ones just under the yoke to raise the back neck, and then just at the hem to lower the back hem, which is so elegant. It just looks so polished and professional. I like the way that it slightly curves at the back. And I didn't really play yarn chicken, because I knew that I would be happy with whatever length I could do. But in the end, this is what I have left of the main color. So it's like 3 grams. So I'm super chuffed with the fact that I could get this sweater, which is not cropped. I think it's like just like perfect regular length. It falls right at a nice point on my hip, which I hope you can see in the video that I put of me modeling it. So I'm really happy. It was a bit stressful with the yoke, but like I said, this year is just about experimenting with fit. Like for example, I want to see if I prefer raglans on me or drop shoulders. Do I prefer cropped or not cropped? Like I want to be able to have a variety of knits and to wear them out with the clothes I already have, so that I can be more aware of my preferences, and then in the next few years of my knitting journey, I'll know what I'm more likely to wear and prefer. So this project then is a good way to see if I like this yoke, and I think I really do. So next time I can take that measurement for the yoke and do that again with other colorwork sweaters, and I can see so many colorwork sweaters in my future. I really like this, if you can't tell. I'm so happy with this. So proud of this, because I remember feeling like color work sweaters were not for me because I wasn't happy with the first two that I made. But this just shows that, practice makes perfect, and if I'm much happier with this, then I can't imagine how happy I will be with the next colorwork sweater. I don't know if there's one in my future that I see specifically. There's another one from Sari Nordland, which is Urban Adventure, and it's also colorwork. Oh, actually, no, I'm lying. There's a Levi pullover that I have the yarn for. I got some Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool. So that would also be a quick knit because it's obviously like a thicker yarn. And I don't know if I want to do it now because I could do it quickly, I'm sure. But like I said, it's getting warmer, so I don't know if I need another big thick colorwork sweater. It's also in like a grayscale kind of colorway. So maybe I'll save that for autumn and I'll focus on a bit more lighter, springy, summery knits. We'll see, but yeah, so 10 out of 10 of this sweater. Oh, and then yeah, I'll put the price here. This was extremely affordable because I bought the Wool on Wool warehouse, but one skein of natural and 4 skeins of black. And like I said, I used basically 4.5 skeins or like 4.75 because there's a bit of white left. And I got the yarn on sale on Wool Warehouse, like 10% off. So this is a super affordable sweater, super fast. The colorways are like endless. I've seen some people obviously like do the reverse where they have a light base and a dark color work. And I've seen people do like a red main color instead of black, it's so nice. It would be nice as well with a blue. I feel like a big vibrant blue and white contrast. But anyway, let me know if you've got any questions about this sweater or if I missed anything. I think I talked about everything, the pattern, the yarn, process, no modifications except from like the color and the fact that it's a size 3 to get me a size 2. And the fact that I cast on for size 2, but everything else I just followed the recommendations for size 3, even the length and the sleeve length. So I'm really happy that I recast it on. In the last episode when I was talking about how I was annoyed at my false starts, it's like if you know that something is dodgy, just get over it and frog it, because I wouldn't have been happy to have finished the yoke and it would have been way too tight and I would have needed to add, like 30 rounds before splitting for sleeves. That wouldn't have been very good. I think the reason that I almost ran out of yarn was because I had planned yarn for a size 2, and in the end, because I ended up knitting a size 3, that was using more yarn. But if I had known from the start I was going to do a size 3, I might have gotten 1 extra ball of yarn, but then I would have had so much left over. So I'm really happy with my choices. This project really worked out. The only thing I would change, I guess, is that if I'm using this yarn again, I would maybe want it on 4.5mm needles instead of 4, because it's a little too dense and not drapey enough. But sometimes you don't want things to be drapey, so I think it's just something that I need to consider and make an informed decision about, instead of just being surprised afterwards. Okay, so let's talk about the next finished item, and it's a pair of socks, and it's also something that featured in the last episodes in terms of a false start. So I had started the sock, it's the Erica socks from the 52 Weeks of Sock book. By the way, the second edition of that book is coming at the end of the month, which is very exciting. I don't know if I'll buy it because I'm still working my way through the first book, but yeah, I think I'll wait until maybe like next year to buy it, because then by then a lot of people will have tried the patterns and then I can read their notes on Ravelry, as I always do. But anyway, the Erica socks are from the first book, and I had casted them on 2.25mm needles, and it was lace, and I wasn't happy with how gapey it was, and some of the holes were just like too big, created by the lace. And actually someone messaged me to say that what I thought was a mistake in the sock that I showed might have just been because on the one hand you get a hole created by a yarn over after a purl, and on the reverse side you get the hole created by a yarn over before a purl. And basically because of the way that those interact with the row below and the row above, one hole might end up bigger than the other one. So it's just something to keep in mind, and maybe something that if I had continued, like, it would have all been harmonious. But anyway, I'll show the socks. And I finished the pair. So here we are. I'll try and show some photos as well of them. Modifications that I did is that I did twisted rib. I think that's a modification. And I did 5 leaves. So I did 2 leaves at the top And then I did the heel, which is a heel flap and gusset. I did that over 1.5 leaf, finished that leaf. I did one more leaf, and then did the toe, which I wasn't sure. The entire plan at the start was to make 6 leaves, because more than half of the projects on Ravelry have 6 leaves, but apparently I have small feet, and I prefer my socks to be like stretched over my foot as opposed to having like a bit of extra fabric at the toe. I think the heel is Eye of Partridge, but after blocking it, yeah, you can see the texture of the heel actually, yeah, but it doesn't look that textured. The other modification that I did was that, just to be extremely finicky, I mirrored the instructions for the second sock. So technically they're supposed to be the same, the right and the left, but I decided to just switch the stitch counts around, because at some point you have a certain amount of stitches, and then the lace panel at the top, and then a certain amount of stitches, and those on the side are different. So I just switched those numbers around for the next sock. And also at some point it has you do a knit 3 together, but so on the other sock I did a slip, slip, slip knit, so that would also be reversed. And I know that literally no one in the world is ever going to notice, but I'm happy that I did it. It just makes me feel like a good knitter. You get extra points for mirroring your socks. Something else that I want to learn is how to do like the asymmetrical toe to get like a more anatomically correct way of fitting over your toes, because this circle round toe obviously is not the same way as your toe is. But yeah, I'll show some modeling of it so that you can see the lace being stretched out. I used Filcolana Arwetta in Marzipan, and this is where it got a bit dicey, because a lot of people were basically doing this with like 1 skein and like 3 grams or 4 grams of their yarn, and I was really trying to get away with just using 1 skein of Marzipan, which I had, and then I realized I was probably going to run out of yarn. And if you're following me on Instagram, you may have seen the sort of step-by-step, like the play-by-play of how that turned out, where it was hard to estimate, you know, from yarn, like in front of you, like, oh, how far can that get me? And to cut a long story short, it didn't get me very far. I had still half of the last toe to do, but I ran out. So what I did was that I unraveled half of my balloon sweater swatch that was using Marzipan as well, and then I used that fingering weight Arwetta to finish the toe. So I was really happy, because then in that sense, yeah, I used 1 skein of Arwetta plus like 2 grams of Arwetta. And I don't really know how other people might be able to just buy 1 skein, because the ribbing at the top, I even cut, I think, 2 rows. Let's say that the ribbing was supposed to be 15 rounds. I made 13 rounds, but that still wasn't enough. So maybe if you made the ribbing even smaller, and I did 5 leaves instead of 6, which again, that should have saved me yarn, but it still wasn't enough. So yeah, this was made on 2mm needles, like I said, which is, it's really great for me, because again, I'm a loose knitter, and I didn't find it hurt my hands to work on it too much, but that's because I don't make my socks really, really fast. I find it so hard to make the second one, but I'm happy that I had the motivation to make the second one, because it's a really beautiful pair of socks. Something that I must say with this project, so you have 3 different charts. You've got like that cable thing here, cable lace, then the leaf, then another cable. And those 2 things on the side are mirrored, so they're 2 different charts. And well, they're mirrored and also staggered. Then you've got the lace chart, which I think repeats over 18 rounds or 20, depending on your size. And at first I thought this was going to be extremely hard. I was going to have to keep track of 3 charts at once. I was considering writing them all down and ticking them as I went. But then I thought it was a bit of work. So what I did was just like being very careful, looking at my knitting book while I was knitting them. And at some point I thought, I think I've got it down. I think I could get away with just not looking at the book anymore and just read my knitting, which I thought was really hard to do for lace. Even though some people had said on Ravelry that the lace pattern was intuitive, I was just thinking, no, they're talking out of their heads. It's impossible for lace to be intuitive. But actually, I realized that I could definitely read the 2 little like side panels. And after a while, I could even read the lace panel at the front, the leaf. So that meant I could do it without looking at the book. And that just made me absolutely speed through the second sock I was so much faster, and I felt so achieved and accomplished that I was able to do lace without looking at the chart. So I'm proud of myself for taking that plunge, and just trusting my instinct that maybe it was time and maybe I could do it, because then, I could do it. So, nice pair of socks. Definitely flying through my goal this year to knit, I think I said 9 pairs of socks. I think it's going to be just fine. Happy to be building on the collection. And I know something that I said I had to do and be more careful of is to not just have my socks stored away and never wear them. I need to actually wear my socks. So I'll try and wear those around the house, and maybe with nice shoes. We'll see when the weather gets a bit nicer. Okay, so that's it for my finished object. The next thing I will talk about is a bit of a fail, but let's just be honest. So it's my lento. That was my entry for the lento knit along, and sadly I must report that I ran out of yarn. I ran out of my brushed alpaca silk, so I didn't complete the lento, which is a shame. And I'm not really in a rush to finish it because I had kind of lost steam on that project. It wasn't bringing as much joy. I know people say that it's so fast, but I was just never working on it, so it wasn't getting work on. So yeah, I love how it looks on camera. In real life, it's just a little bit too orange. And I did some balloon sleeves. So I never did any decreases on the sleeve, and then I bind off with an I-cord bind off, which I thought was quite fun to try on. I just did a round of decreases before the I-cord, and then did the I-cord on the same needle size, which is 5.5mm needles. And I was going to do that on the other side, but I ran out. I ran out of brushed alpaca, and I still hadn't even done the body. I was wondering whether to do an I-cord at the body as well, or some ribbing to match this ribbing, but the question doesn't even need to be asked anymore because I'm just not going to be finishing this for a bit. I think next time I do an order on Wool Warehouse, I'll just add a ball of the brushed alpaca. But yeah, I was making that with drops alpaca and then drops brushed alpaca silk, but all of the details are on my Ravelry. So yeah, I wasn't really happy with this project. I think, like other people have said, it's a nice project because the possibilities are endless and you can make as many modifications as you want. I had made a pearl seam going down the sides of the body and also going up the sleeve to match that line. I was happy with that modification. I was happy with my modifications of the sleeve being a bit balloony and large. I was kind of embracing that vibe recently. But it was just a bit stressful. It became too stressful because I had gone so off pattern. Then I was knitting and having to use my creative muscle as opposed to using my following instruction muscle. And I hope that makes sense. But sometimes I just don't want to have to think about anything. I just want to follow exactly pattern instructions. Like I did for this, there was almost zero thinking required, even up all the way down to color choice. The only time I had to think for that was whether to make the yoke longer or not. And that was a choice that paralyzed me for like 4 days, which slowed me down. But apart from that, it was just smooth sailing. And I find that more often than not, I am more in a mood to just follow instructions and the knitting patterns. And that's why I like the knitting patterns that are like written perfectly, that you don't have to do any of the guesswork. And I know some other people, they like to be challenged by the fact that sometimes they don't hold your hand and you have to do a bit of math or a bit of guessing or just like interpretation. And I don't like it when pattern designers let things to my interpretation because I just rather that they told me. But that's absolutely down to personal preference. And sometimes I am in the mood to do modifications. I'm in the process of kind of trying to not design a pattern at all, will not be released, but just I want to take some of the best parts of a few patterns and make my own sweater. It's going to look something like sweater number 9 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, but I'll incorporate some elements of things that I've really been enjoying over the last year of patterns that I've made. So yeah, just keep your eyes out for that because I'll obviously talk about that and I'll talk about the design elements that sweater will have. But that's just kind of on its own thing. That's something that I'm planning to do. But most of the time what I just want to do is just knit something that I don't have to think about. And the lento was getting a bit too difficult in that sense because it was left to me. So yeah, wasn't enjoying the lento anymore. I did enjoy doing the knit along. It was quite fun to see everyone's variations of it. I have the yarn for a second one, like I said, and then that one I might just follow the pattern to the letter. Although I might have a look at the hashtag on Instagram, like Let's Lento Cal, or just no, Let's Lento. That's the hashtag. And I might follow that to see other modifications from people and then try and do those for that project. Like once I obviously finish the first one, then I'll do the second one. But yeah, it was fun. I think I need to cool down a little bit with the test knits and the cals, and I'll talk about that later in the test knit portion, because then it becomes something that I'm doing for other people as opposed to for me, and I just get I get too roped into hypes, and sometimes I need to make a conscious effort to remove myself from those situations if they get a bit too overwhelming. So yeah, that was my lento. It's not a complete fail. Like it's not a fail, but it's a bit anticlimactic that it's not finished. So the next section will be my works in progress, and I'll show a sock first because it'll be fast. So that sock is from the Colorwork book by Charlotte Stone. It's this book, Charming Colorwork Socks. I got that when she released it just at the end of last year. And I'm making the eggs for Easter socks, which I'll just show here. It's a really cute little colorwork sock, and I showed in my last episode another failed attempt at colorwork for socks because I had made them on 2 big needles. And the way that Charlotte designs most of her patterns is that she has you increase stitch count for the colorwork, again in the sense that tons of people have problems with their colorwork being too tight. But I have the opposite problem. So for these socks, I decided to do the size 2, which is a 64 stitch count sock, and to do them on 2mm needles, except the colorwork will be done on 2.25, and I will not increase stitch count. So it took me a bit of figuring out to decide that that was the way I was going to do it, but I'm happy that I did, because then I did this sock. Ta-da! So here's the colorwork at the top. It's adorable little chickens. They are absolutely amazing. And then you've got a little bit of a pattern at the front of the sock here, like a knits and pearls kind of thing. And then you've got that egg colorwork at the bottom. How cute. So really happy. And the other good thing about that is that it's just made using yarn I had in stash. So if you recognize this blue, that's actually the blue that I used in my boyfriend's socks. It's Juniper by West Yorkshire Spinner Signature 4-ply. The white is also from that brand, and it's the leftovers for my Una socks. It's the colorway Marshmallow. And then the yellow is also leftover from the same brand, the colorway Butterscotch, and that was leftover from the socks I made back in January. So super happy to be using that. The red is Malabrigo sock, but there's like only like a scrap amount. You do a tiny bit of duplicate stitch for the chickens. There's like the beak and the nettle. That's colorwork, but the other parts are that's embroidery, but duplicate stitch. But the rest is colorwork. I don't think there's any round that has 3. All the rounds are just 2 colors at a time. Here's my floats on the inside. It's not great. But the good news, obviously, is that they do fit over my foot, which is amazing. Something very interesting that happened with that sock, actually, was that the pattern says, here's the instructions for a slip stitch heel. But then the instructions are actually for a rib, and it's not a slip stitch heel. And I was looking at Ravelry to see if people heels were looking like slip stitches or ribbed, and it's actually kind of hard to tell. Maybe you can. I definitely couldn't. And I was wondering if the designer meant to say a ribbed heel, or if they meant to say the slip stitch instructions. And I actually messaged Charlotte on Instagram, and she got back to me very quickly, and she said that it was a mistake and it was supposed to be slip stitches, but I still did it in the rib because I was curious to see how that was going to be. And actually it's fine. I quite like it, but it is quite stretchy, bouncy, quite thick as well. And I don't know how it's going to wear, but it's a different heel, I guess. But it was a mistake. It was not intentional by the designer, and she said that this will be corrected when she releases the pattern as a single pattern to buy on Ravelry. I don't think that it is available right now, just as a single pattern. And then she said that she would also correct it for the reprints of the book. So I feel quite proud to have spotted that mistake, and I feel really grateful that the designer took that feedback into account, because like I said, there's a book I have where I've messaged the designer, like I've tried to get in touch with her on many platforms. She will not get back to me. So the book that I'm sadly loving a lot of patterns from has mistakes in it, and they don't seem to be corrected anytime soon. But this one is going to be corrected, and I need to get around to making the second sock, which is always a hassle and a pain, but they're really short. They're shorties, so that should be fast. The color work was quite fast for the chickens. It was just, it's difficult to get the tension right. And then just, yeah, the length of the foot. The color, the toe went really fast as well, because of like just the number of steps that they are. You always want to reach the next step, and it just seems like really like in reach. And then by the time you realize, it's like, oh, I've actually finished it. And it took longer than I thought. I think I started to make the toe like late at night one night, and I thought, oh, that's what, like 1-2 hours of knitting? But it was like 3 or 4 hours of knitting. But anyway. Oh yeah, another part actually is that, so normally when you're increasing to make the chickens, so for my size, I should have increased to then make 6 chickens, but I only have 5. And because of that, my stitch count was off. So I had 64 stitches, and the color work was over an amount of stitches that 64 did not divide by. So what I ended up having to do was actually to remove some stitches and decrease. So I was on my 2.25mm needles, about to do some color work that I was meant to increase for, and I decreased. So then I did the color work for size 1. And at first I thought it was madness and I was going to end up with like way too small a sock, but then it was fine. So yeah, I think this is the cutest little sock ever, the cutest little toe. I just need to get around to making the second one. It's just that at the moment I've had a lot of projects that I've been doing, like I said, like kind of for other people. And I want to use my knitting time for projects that like bring a lot of excitement and joy, like this one was. That one was like so fun to work on. So I want to keep chasing the projects that bring that feeling. Okay, so next project is a test knit for Along Avec Anna. It's called the Primrose Slipover, and I'm making it with Along Avec Anna yarn. I'm using the merino 4-ply fingering weight merino and mohair in the color Celadon. And it's almost done. I was really hesitating filming today or just like in a few days because I'm so close to being done. But what I think I'll do is I'll talk about the knitting of that in this episode, and then next episode I'll model it and film that, and then I'll talk about the testing aspect of this, just so that I don't repeat like the same information over and over. So I'll try and hold that up. It's a slipover that basically only joins at the side with some little bows. So it's knitted flat for the front panel and for the back panel. So here it is. That's the front that I'm showing you. So there we go. And as you can see on the side, we've got some ties. So you've got the front and the back. You've got a little tie in double knitting and a tie in double knitting. And you can join those two with a little bow. I'm making the size 3, which is 100 centimeter circumference, I guess. It's a big, thick, folded neckline. I was a bit annoyed, and I shared that on my Instagram. My pickup for the stitches at the neck wasn't the neatest. As you can see here, there's like a line of like increases, and here there isn't. But, you know, from here, you cannot see that. So that's fine. I like the color on me. If anything, I'm almost upset that I chose this color for this slipover, because I would have preferred to have an entire sweater made of this color. But the Along Avec Anna website has amazing colors. They've just released 3 new colors. One is like jade. One is called Rêverie, which is like dreaming. And I think those are also amazing soft colors that would be nice for a sweater. There's also a pearl round that you do to fold the neckline. And mine, for some reason, is sitting on the outside instead of at the top, which also bothers me a little bit. You can see that, like, I wish that this pearl round was just, like, at the top, And I think this has something to do with the way that I folded the neckline over and sewed it on the inside. I think, because here, that one, the purl round is right there. I think the purl round actually on my loom, I made that up. That wasn't in the pattern, but yeah, I made a purl round here to fold the neckline over. So just something to keep in mind, because now I know that that's a risk. I'll be careful next time to make sure that the purl round ends up exactly at the top of the double folded edge. And I think I did a pretty neat job on the inside, because it's quite a nice seamless line. The double knitting took forever for those little bands. You made 4 of them. I know there's some like wrap cardigans that have you make one extremely long one that goes all the way around. I don't know if that would be better or worse. So you're supposed to basically just like knit the back and then pick up for the left shoulder, pick up for the right shoulder, make the front, pick up for the neck, but I always do the neck like as soon as I can just to see how it like fits better when I'm trying it on. There's like a nice I-cord edge basically here. So there's no finishing to be done at the end. This is what it's going to look like. It's very nice and neat. Just like intentionally kind of rolling in. Super neat. And then you make the cords basically like to hit you at the waist. And then you knit down to a certain length and then you can add some ribbing. So I've just got the ribbing left to do, and then I'm going to block this, take some photos and send the feedback to Anna. She's planning to release the pattern on March 24th, I think. Yeah, you can get your hands on really soon on it. The issue I had with this is that I ran out of the fingering weight merino, and then I had to order it, and I was a bit annoyed at having to like order 1 ball of yarn just because of like shipping and everything. So I bought a bit more yarn to go with it. And then after that, I realized I was also going to run out of mohair, and by this point I was just thinking, I really don't want to buy just 1 ball of mohair and go through that again. So I decided to do the ribbing without mohair. So as you can see, I haven't done it yet, so we'll see that in the next episode, but I think it'll be fine. And Anna said it was okay. I'm just a bit annoyed at myself for not buying 1 more ball of mohair just in case, but I was basing myself on what other test knitters were saying about how they had run out of only the merino but not the mohair. But yeah, that's what comes with test knitting, is that nothing is final. And in the final pattern, Anna also changed the ties and how thick and long they are, so that might look a little bit different on the final pattern than it does on mine. But like I said, I'm just going to stop talking about this now because we're going to run out of time, because I still have things to talk about. But I'll talk about this project a bit more then in the next video. Okay, so the next item was originally supposed to just be a swatch. Like, that's really what I thought I was going to be showing you today. And it's the Single Malt Sweater by Maxim. Sir Max the Knitter. So I made this with Cascade 220 that I bought on sale at Lovecraft. And it's in the colorway Chocolate Heather, which my boyfriend picked himself. And it's this gorgeous little like texture of knits and pearls. The color is quite dark in real life, I would say. It has some tiny little strands of like red and yellow spun with the brown. So it's a really, really nice heathered color. Absolutely gorgeous. This is thinner than the yarn that's suggested, so I went down the needle size. I'm using 4.5 millimeter. As you can see, it creates like a little bit of a holy fabric. Like there is some density, there's a lack of density, I guess, but then once it's on the skin, it's completely fine and, you know, not see-through whatsoever. And my boyfriend said that he was happy with like the drapiness and density of the swatch. I think it shows off the stitch pattern really well. So anyway, I thought that was all I was gonna have, but then I just couldn't stop myself from casting it on, and I was kind of working on that as a bit of a reward for finishing that one and to motivate me to finish the Primrose. So this is what I've got. So yeah, I've done the entire yoke and I've worked down some of the body quite significantly as well. It's looking a bit small, but it stretches out a lot because it's like basically a rib. It's got an amazing raglan here, like a thick 5-stitch raglan that flows from the neck rib. It's like 2x1 rib. Yeah, it's beautiful. And my boyfriend has tried it on a few times and it works. Again, I'm doing size 3 for him to get a size 2 I made a few notes on my Ravelry about the modifications I was intending to make for this, and one of the main ones that I'm doing is that, see that detail of the raglan? Apparently you're going to continue that detail for the sleeve. And I've decided to add it to the body as well. So I've added this kind of line of knits and pearls at the edges of the body, which I'm pretty proud of doing. I think it's going to be a really nice continuation of it. And my boyfriend said that like it was something that he would also enjoy on the finished product. What I'm not super happy with is I think I've made the neck just like a tad too long. It's veering into dangerous funnel neck territory. But again, once you're wearing it and it stretches out, then it kind of gets smaller. And I feel like with that, we definitely don't run into the risk of having his t-shirt show through because it just has like a tiny bit more centimeters. But if I hate it, I think we could always like fold the neck and sew it down to give that like double folded neck edge. Sorry, it's getting to like 45 minutes of filming and I'm like losing my train of thoughts. This knit is extremely enjoyable. The pattern, the stitch pattern is like so addictive and I've been flying through that. I've used 2 skeins of yarn so far and I'm about to do the sleeves now with my third. I've bought 5 skeins, but I guess I might run out. That's okay. And then the body might be like quite long. I think it's definitely longer than like the body of this Lumme jumper, but that's fine. We don't want a cropped sweater for my boyfriend. Yeah, what else to say? It's just been so enjoyable and I've loved every second of it and I've been putting that love in every stitch. Like it feels so good to be making a sweater for a loved one and it's not a surprise, so there's really not a lot of stress. He's happy to try it on like at every step of the way. And I'm a bit worried of the sleeves because lots of people have said that they might be too tight, but we've looked at one of the sweaters that he likes that's like ready to wear and calculated with my gauge and the stitch count that was going to be pretty much the same thing. So I think I'm going to do the sleeves as written, but if not, I'll do the decreases less frequently than what the pattern calls for, like other ravelers have suggested. One modification that I did actually was when I finished the increases for my size, Max said to just split for sleeves, but I added a good 1.5 inches of knitting and pattern to make the yoke deeper. I think I was at like 7.5 inches and I made it to like 9 or 9.5 because that's what the schematic asked for, and also because when he tried it on, again, like when we looked at his armpit, we didn't want it to be cutting right across it. And even now in retrospect, I think that we could have gotten away with making it like even a 1/2 inch like longer. I'm just always scared of having yokes that are too long, but one day I'm going to run into the problem of having a yoke that's too short. But we'll see when I make the beginning of a sleeve as well, because it's really hard to tell those things. It's hard to tell how a yoke fits when you don't have the body and you don't have the sleeve. And then once you add the body, you can get a better idea. Then you add the sleeve and you have an even better idea. And then you block and then you can finally tell whether the yoke depth was good or not. Or anyway, that's how I see it. Maybe more experienced knitters know right away if a yoke is too deep or too small. But yeah, that is basically a project that I want to spend all my waking hours doing, but I need to finish my test knit first and foremost. And then the very last thing that I've cast on literally this morning that I wanted to talk about really briefly is just a Mary Wallen pattern, and it's the Burra cowl from her book Shetland, and that's made with Jameson and Smith. I talked about the yarn and kind of the reasoning behind the pattern in my previous video about like my knitting goals for 2023, and it was to make a Mary Wallen pattern. So I'm super excited. I think it's going to be extremely fun to be working with all those colors. I'm making it on, I really don't know what the like inches are, but it's like the circular needles that come with a Chayagu set, like the smallest size cable. So it's not like I'm making this on minis or on Magic Loop. It's just like very nice, ergonomically, like appropriate needles. And I've literally just cast on this morning, and modifications that I'm doing, again, thanks to the help of like a lot of ravelers, is that I'm doing a provisional cast on so that afterwards I can graft it with Kitchener, because Mary Wallen has you just do a normal cast on and then sew the edge to that, but I'm trying to make it as seamless and perfect as possible. And the really good thing about the pattern is that it actually has, at the very beginning, it has 2 rounds of plain stockinette, So I'm starting on round 2 of just 1 round of plain stockinette, and then my Kitchener graft will then be round 1 of plain stockinette. So there will be no color work or duplicate stitch involved. It's just those 2 rounds are going to be the beginning and the end. And I'm doing the provisional using the crochet hook method. So here's what I've got. As you can see, it's nothing. But the brown is some sock yarn that I'm using, and I did the crochet hook. And then the gray is my Jamieson and Smith. Yeah, I think another modification that I'm going to do is that the pattern has you repeat the whole length of the stitch pattern 4 times, and I'm just going to be repeating it 3 times, because I don't want it to be like droopy and hanging very low. I want it to be closer to my neck, and I know from other people's like kind of notes on the sizing is that it's not going to be strangling me, so that's fine. And I'll block it before grafting instead of after. I also am making it on smaller needles than recommended, again because I'm just such a loose knitter. She recommends 3.25, but I'm making it on 2.75, so quite happy about that. I think something that I might do is knit it inside out so that my floats are nice and loose, but I don't know, because I'm already a loose knitter, so I don't know if that's needed. I'm tempted to try different methods of color work, because this project is supposed to be helping me learn so that I can move on to making more elaborate things like vests or sweaters or cardigans and steeks. So I need to get a bit more confident with the way that I manage color work and ends and floats and everything. I'll see about what float management or end management technique I use. I might use like the weaving Steven, like weaving them as I go, or carrying them up rounds. I'll see what I do with the ends, but I'll let you know. So yeah, that's something that's also kind of something that I've just been really itching to cast on and work on. I'm going to try and probably do like a certain amount of rounds a day or a week, just to try and get some steady progress, but I can tell it's probably going to be quite addictive, so I'm looking forward to that. And then the other thing that I'm going to cast on extremely soon is a fingering weight sweater, because I was so happy with the one that I had made. I talk about that in my first couple podcast episodes. It's made with Kinross 4-ply from Wee County Yarn, which is a beautiful, delightful 100% lamb's wool produced here in Scotland, and it softens up incredibly after washing. It feels like cashmere. I've been influenced by Rebecca from the Crea Bea, who made her own fingering weight sweater using it, and she was raving about it, and I thought I needed to try that, and it's very local to me, so I can get it in person in some shops or also online. It's becoming more prevalent in lots of different knitting shops. So here's the color that I got. This is called Scots Pine, and it's this kind of like dark turquoise forest green. It's got like some bright blue, but also spun with some very dark green or dark blue. So it's a very heathered color, and here it is caked up. So yeah, that's the colors I've got, and I'm going to be making, I think, a bibliophile by Alicia Plummer, I think. She recently released actually a DK version of that, but I want to make it fingering weight, just to make things a bit harder. And just because I love how small the stitches look on my daily pullover that I made with the Kinross 4-ply. I'm excited about the color. It looks like it's not too bright, obviously it's like a dark color, and I think I suit dark colors better than light colors. And I want this sweater to be like a staple, and I think it'll just be more interesting to work with that than the grey that I was working with last time. I got a bit bored of how grey it was, and I'm just so happy about the kind of color variation in this heathered yarn. It's going to be great to block it and feel how soft it is. I think I'm going to be making the turtleneck version. I think Alicia has 3 different neckline finishing options, and I'm going to go with the turtleneck, that you kind of like, you fold it and you don't sew it down, you just like let it hang, because the yarn is going to be so soft. It's something that I'm going to be happy having like up on my neck. I will be doing it with the same needles that I used for the daily pullover, because it's the same gauge, and I know the gauge that I got was fine, so that's nice that I don't have to gauge swatch. I might eat my words later, but I think we'll be fine. So yeah, just need to free up some of the needles by finishing the test knit, and then I'll be casting this on. And again, it's not something that I foresee myself finishing like by the next podcast, definitely not, but it's just something that I want to work on in the background if I want some stockinette, because it's a raglan, the bibliophile. it's a raglan, so it'll just be mindless knitting, which is always handy in some situations. And then the last thing that I want to talk about really quickly is just some acquisitions. So like I said, I bought this when I was trying to make my delivery costs worth it when I bought more Along avec Anna yarn. That was from Fine Fetal Fibers, by the way. I'll put the link below. They've got a nice, lovely little selection of yarns. So the other acquisitions that I've got, I got some sock yarn from Lovecraft when they were having their 20% off sale, and it's brands that I've heard really good things about, so I was happy to put my hands on them. I actually don't even have a pattern that I want to use these for, but it's sock yarn, like there'll always be socks. I've got my 52 weeks of sock like book, which is a great source of inspiration, and then there's also tons and tons of patterns out there on Ravelry that are free. So here's Novita Venla, which is a 4-ply sock yarn. This is the colorway, no, I don't know, but I'll put it below because I know what it is. So just kind of like an ochre color, just really nice. It feels quite like rough and tough, thick. I'm not quite sure of the contents of it. Clearly I should have done a bit more research on it, but it just is a brand that people have talked about a lot. It's quite affordable as well and easily accessible here in the UK. And then the other one is Regia 4-ply yak, merino yak, and this is like a nice color. I thought it was going to be redder, but I'm not mad about this kind of pinkish hue. That one is also like wool polyamide, and it has 14% yak. And then I'm really, really excited to try this because I've heard amazing things about yak, but I want to see it for myself to see if the hype is called for. But like I said, I don't have really like concrete plans for those two things yet. It's just nice to try different sock yarns because, like I said, I've made so many pairs of socks in Filcolana Arweta and also in West Yorkshire Spinners, like signature 4-ply. So it'll be really nice to try and branch out. Then the next thing is I succumbed again to peer pressure and I bought a cone from Woolly Knit. So this is a merino cone. If you don't know about Woolly Knit, they were a relatively small brand that Rebecca from the Crea Bea talked about at length and even partnered with for a cone along last year. And it's been really great for that company that they got so much more attention. I've really only heard good things about them. I've not tried it myself yet, so obviously don't take my word for it, but I've heard good things about them, about like how ethical their company is, how hardworking the wool is. This merino, for example, is like definitely not going to be as soft as a superwash merino. It's non-superwash, but it's quite soft. Like as I'm touching it here, I wouldn't mind having this on a jumper, which is obviously what I'm planning to do. I'll hold it double because it's 4-ply, and I really like that color. I think it's going to be interesting to see if it suits me. I think it'll be great. It's like a very like dark kind of gold, like old gold color. It looks like a metal. It's amazing. And I don't know what pattern I'm going to do, but I know I want it to be simple because it's kind of like an out there color. So what I'm thinking of is either a no frills or a Semper sweater by the Knit Pearl Girl, which are both like just super classic raglans. Or I might try and find a drop shoulder pattern for a DK. If you have an idea for a DK way simple basic sweater, then let me know, because I think the reason I don't want to do the no frills is because I want to try and do a designer that's not petite knit, just to try and like see what's out there in terms of like timeless, easy to wear wardrobe staples. And I'm just very excited to be using this wool. So one cone is 500 grams and is supposed to see you through, you know, at least one whole sweater, maybe a pair of accessories or a hat, obviously depending on your size. And then the very last acquisition that I also got on sale, that was from Maple Tree Yarn. They're an amazing little website based in Wales, and they do a lot of Filcolana, and that's where I buy all my Filcolana because it's very affordable. They were having a little 10% sale the other day, so I stocked up on a sweater quantity. And this is, again, something that I've talked about before. It's for my black sweater that I've been so eager to make because obviously I like dark colors. And I talked about the yarn choice in my video about my knitting goals. I said that I think I had settled on the Dartmoor sweater and this yarn combination. So I bought it. So I've got Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool in charcoal and Filcolana Alva in black. And I'm going to be holding these together to get some kind of like depth and a bit more interest than just plain black, although I probably still will be on the hunt for like a plain black sweater once I find an appropriate pattern and like go for it. But I think it'll be interesting to hold those two together. I didn't want to use a mohair because it's not something that I love to wear every day, and I'm very like picky about the mohairs that I can tolerate. I like the Essiger one, but it's quite pricey, and also they don't have like I haven't been able to find black Essiger mohair in ages because it's so popular. So Alva is like a lace weight alpaca strand that you can hold like in combination with things to maybe replace mohair. Obviously it'll depend on gauge, so I'll make sure to gauge swatch. And again, I don't know if I'm going to be making that like very soon just because of how it's getting warmer, and I don't want to be holding like that much yarn and that much black in my lap when it's warm. But I also feel like this would be a quick knit because of like the gauge of the Dartmoor. So I don't know if I'm going to be making that as my last sweater of like March, wintry season. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be knitting summer tops like all summer, but I think I'm going to be making DK sweaters and like mohair-less sweaters over the course of the summer. But summer is always really cold in Scotland anyway, like it's quite short. So I know that even in June we'll have some very bad weeks. And then as soon as September comes along, it'll be right back to cold weather. So yeah, I hope that was an enjoyable episode. I think that's all I had to say. I feel like throughout the course of this last hour, my mind started to go, so I'm really sorry if you noticed that. But it was really enjoyable to like sit down and film and chat through all the stuff I've been up to in the last 3 weeks. It's always hard to know how often to make these, because if I made it a week ago, I don't know if I would have had enough to say, but if I made it next week, I might have had way too much to say. Like even here, I felt like I had to rush a little bit through the ends because I don't want my podcast to be like over an hour by too long. Yeah, it's been so enjoyable to document this progress and process. That's why I've made this podcast to start with, is to be able to look back on these and to see the evolution of my knits, and also, you know, just seeing something as an idea and then seeing it as a swatch a month later, as an acquisition, and then as a knitted jumper, and then hopefully an idea for a video that I'm going to do probably like next year is kind of touching base with all the sweaters I've made and how often I've been wearing them, how they've been wearing, and if I have any notes based on like that length of time, as opposed to just like first impressions. Oh, I love this sweater. It's like, okay, how do I feel about this sweater a year down the line? So I'll definitely be looking forward to doing that kind of video in the future. But let me know if you have any other requests or ideas for things that you'd like to see from me, because I make these podcasts. This is episode 5, but I have like, I think 12 videos on my channel just now. So there's definitely other types of videos that I like doing if you want to peruse those at your leisure. I hope that you got some progress done on your project. And like I said, if you're enjoying this content, then please like the video and subscribe to the channel to see more of what I put out. And also comment, because it makes my little heart sing when I get to interact with people. It just feels so nice, and I'm part of a community, the knitting community, as cheesy as that sounds. But yeah, I'll be seeing you soon then for a next video. I'm really looking forward to starting a new wave of projects. I feel like I've been working on these projects for quite a while, so it'll be nice to like see what the next, 4 things are.